Hello, everyone, and welcome to our book club meeting about Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Today we have with us a very special surprise guest, my mother. Welcome aboard. Welcome. How does it feel to be on the Hillis Joe channel?
Thank you. I'm very honored.
This wouldn't exist without you.
Oh, that's true.
Let's see your version of the book. This I was not expecting.
This is the original version of the book, only it's in big type with numbers.
It's like a Bible.
So that when you're doing a study with it, you could go, oh, let's go look at 897.
You might as well call it verse. Go to verse 897.
Yeah.
That's so funny.
We call it line. Go to line.
I don't like how big it is, though, because then you can't, like, put it in your purse.
No, you can't put it in your purse.
I intentionally
you can put it in a bag.
Mine is from the Napoleon Hill Foundation.
Oh.
And it's the original.
Oh, so mine's the original too.
Right. So we both have probably read the same version.
Yes.
1937. 1937.
He interviewed over 25,000 people.
It's crazy.
To come up with his conclusions. And when he talks about things, first of all, the Think and Grow Rich, I was very resistant to reading this.
Yeah, look what mine says. For men and women who resent poverty. I was like, whoa.
Oh.
I don't know if that's his tagline or if they just put that on.
Wow. There. I was like, well, nobody should be focusing on being rich.
Right.
You know, that's just not.
I felt the same.
That's not a good thing to focus on because, you know, all my life I heard things like the love of money is the root of all evil. Right. I had this kind of,
if you're rich, good luck getting a camel through the eye of a needle.
Right. If you're rich, you probably stepped on a lot of people to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I just had that, and maybe it's because it's kind of portrayed that way in some movies. I don't know, but what I realized was as I kept going through my journey in life, I was adapting these belief systems about being rich and having money. But I started to realize that a lot of really good people are rich, but they're not using their money for themselves. For instance, Mother Teresa. She's a perfect example. She was probably one of the richest people in her day. And yet people look at her as being very poor.
Right.
But it's because she didn't use her money for herself.
Right.
Anytime she needed money, she was resourced. People believed in her cause. Money just came to her, you know. So I started taking...
Which is so counterintuitive. By acting not rich, she became so rich.
Right. I have a cousin who I consider very well off, very rich. And I'm always amazed at when I have a conversation with him. He's just so full of compassion. But anyway, I started to reevaluating my belief system. And even that, you know, that scripture passage, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's the love of money. It's not having money.
Right.
It's the love of money. So if you're focused on having, then you're going to miss out on the beautiful riches of what this book is really talking about. Because it's talking about us becoming better people.
Right.
And I once heard it said, you know, good people do good things with money. Bad people do bad things with money. So money doesn't make you or break you as far as your character goes. It kind of reveals what your character is.
Right. It's kind of like having power, over people. Like being the president doesn't make you a bad person because you have all that power. It's what you do with it that.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and I thought I just finished the book this morning, parked outside on the street before I came in. So the ending of it is resonant in my mind. But he talks about in the end, why did I write a book about money? Because you're not supposed to focus on that. And he did it because he wrote this right after the Great Depression, when everyone was so focused on being poor and woe is me and everything. But then he says, you know, there's many other ways to be rich, which is why he used the word rich. not wealthy, because you can be rich spiritually and all that. So he says it in the end, at least. But yeah. So this book was way better than I thought it was going to be. It was so, like, oh my gosh. Like you said, he did so much research into how to be successful and what you need to do. It's called Think and Grow Rich. I feel like if it was written today, the title would be, how many steps are there? It's 13, the 13 steps to riches.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't realize it was going to be, I just wasn't expecting it to be such a step by step. Like, first you need to do this, focus on that, then you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I was expecting more like, here's some things to think about. Here's what some things that you need. I didn't realize it was like, this is the step to becoming successful. This is like, just do these 13. Like, I was like, oh, I want to do this book club, and we're just going to read a new book, kind of self-development-y something every month. And then after reading this, I'm like, no, I just want to read this again every month and just incorporate and get the Bible so you can study the verse, which is what he says in here. He's like, you just need to do this.
By the way, anybody can get this on Amazon.
I want to now. I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea.
It's by Paul Martinelli.
The reason that Mom is on here today is because she was texting me throughout the reading process some quotes that she, like, I thought you were just reading. I thought you had seen my YouTube. Well, you did see the video, obviously. Or how did you know I was doing this?
I don't know. I was scrolling through, and I just heard you say that you were reading it.
Right.
And I was like, oh wow, I can talk to Joe about this, because once you start,
I thought you saw me say that in the video and started reading it and were reading it with me. I didn't realize you were like, oh, I live by this book. Thanks for. It's like, wow.
I thought, oh, how exciting! I have someone to talk to about this.
It's so good though. So anyway, okay, so just kind of we've just been talking about it, but like the background on what it is. Like I said, it's like 13 steps to riches. And he just interviewed thousands of people. Like, this was his life.
Over 25,000.
It wasn't like, oh, I've got some wisdom, let me share with the world, which is, I feel like, what a lot of the books are, which isn't bad. But this was like, this is my life's work. I'm gonna find out what makes you rich, what makes you rich.
Right.
And again, like we said, it can be any type of rich. The book is focused on money, but it can be anything that you want to succeed in.
Right. So what he did was he wrote down the truths that he discovered that were true for every single person that he interviewed. So, and he discovered a lot of laws of nature, like just how nature works, just how energy works.
And actually, I was surprised. I mean, I don't know what the zeitgeist was in 1937 as far as religion and spirituality. I'm no historian. So he references a lot. What does he call it? The infinite intelligence. Mm-hmm. I get the impression he doesn't believe in like formal religion, but he talks about Christ, he mentions, as a person. Mm-hmm. I don't know that he sees him as divine, but I just thought it was interesting. He talks about the infinite intelligence, and he does believe that there is, kind of more of like the spirituality force of nature. But he says he believes in a higher intelligence, and he believes that, like the non-physical, and how we need to tap into that. So I thought it was so interesting reading it through his lens of that. And when one thing that really just struck me is he was talking about prayer, and he was talking about how if you come to prayer without believing that this will take place, it's not going to. And he's talking about it not in like, I don't think he sees God as like a person. So I do. But I'm like, that still can hold true. You know what I mean? If you come to God like with this, it's almost like this pathetic request, like, if you would, but I don't really, you don't have that full faith. He talks a lot about faith, which was so interesting to me. And I just thought it was interesting. He's like, when you pray for something, you better believe it. Like, you need to have faith that it's going to, faith to move a mustard seed. You have to have faith that it's going to. Or
even faith that it can happen.
Right. Yes.
I mean, even if you just have to start there.
Right.
Because you think about the Wright brothers, they had a thought that came from God. I mean, this is how he talks about it.
From the infinite intelligence.
Yeah. So he talks about God and how God plants these seeds in us. And most of us will go, oh, I don't know how to do that. So then we keep dismissing it. But the Wright brothers and many other people, as we know,
Yeah, inventing the light bulb, right? How many times?
decided not to dismiss it and go, okay, I have this thought. And then they get committed to pursuing it. And they don't let anything stop them. I mean, look, the Wright brothers didn't know
Right.
how to fly a plane. They didn't know. Nobody's ever done that
Right.
before. Look at how many times they had to fail, but they finally did it because they were determined.
It's so true. Like, I bring this up in some of my classes. I think about it with my kids. If they think they can't do something, climb up to something or lift something, or one that sticks out is I remember Damien was trying to open a door and it was a weird door handle thing and it was harder to get. When they think they can't do something, they're going to give up. But if they trust me, when I tell them with certainty that they can do it, I'm like, you can do it. Often they're like, oh, okay. And then they just keep going because they trust me, an outside source telling them that they can do it. So part of it has to become, we have to learn to tell ourselves that these things, that it's like, no, if you persist, you can do this. And it's not just possible, but it will happen if you persist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like, mind blowing.
Right. Well, one of the concepts I think is really interesting is that successful people don't think if, they think how.
Right.
That's just how they live their lives. They think how am I going to do this, not if.
Which I feel like I got that from you. I feel like you do that naturally, or maybe you taught yourself to do it. Like, I find myself doing that with Erin a lot. Like, we will have to pack the van and we have to put something in there with all the whatever, and she'll be like, well, how are we really going to be able to fit that out? And I'm like, what do you mean? We're going to? Like, no, this is what we need to do. Like, it's going to happen. Right, we just have to figure it out. And I feel like I do that in practical ways a lot like that. Like, am I going to have enough time to do this? No, I have to do this. This is just, we're going to have to make this happen. Like, when I hadn't finished the book and I just made this meeting to come over first thing in the morning. It's like, I have to make,
that's so funny.
It's just got to happen. So I do that in practical ways, but then it's like thinking big and getting bigger and thinking, what do I want? What do I need? Writing down your goals. I mean, he talks about how important it is, and I know this from other places, how important it is to write down what you're trying to accomplish, what your goal is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because he says that everything has energy. And I think instinctively we kind of know that, like when someone walks into the room and they're very positive, you just feel that positive energy. When someone negative walks into the room, you experience this, the opposite.
Right.
So, but he talks about, he really made me aware of how everything has energy. So when you've decided a specific goal and you want to work towards that goal, saying it gives it more energy. Writing it down gives it more energy. Mm-hmm. The more times you think about it gives it more energy. It's one of the laws of nature.
Right. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And it's true, negative and positive. Like, I started telling my kids not to complain, not in those words, but if they're like, oh, I don't feel well. And I'm like, every time you say that, you're telling your brain you don't feel it. You're perpetuating it a little bit more. You know what I mean? It's like whenever you say anything negative or positive, you are hearing what you're hearing it and you're saying it, like you're totally reinforcing it.
Reinforcing it, yes. And you're giving energy to it.
Right, you're giving energy to it, right? Yeah. You're bringing it into, I actually naturally don't, when I start feeling well and don't start feeling sick or, just whatever, I never say it. And Erin, I just did this naturally. Erin would be like, are you feeling okay? Or like, what? And I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. Like, I just knew that, like, I don't want to dwell on that. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to like get into that perpetuating thought process.
So you think even just being observant of it?
I mean, I think any type of dwelling, like.
Yeah, dwelling might be different than making an observation. Like, you cannot feel well and say, I don't feel well. I'm looking forward to feeling good soon.
That's true.
Because then it changes your
right. Yeah,
it changes the energy. You don't leave it hanging at the negative.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's okay to make an observation, but just like you say, don't
don't
dwell
dwell
on it.
Don't keep. Well, that's what I mean. They'll say it once, and that's fine. But then when they keep saying, "Oh, I don't feel well," or "I'm hungry," it's like, no. Every time you say that, like, you need to just move on. So one thing I feel like I underlined this in a million ways. I feel like one resounding message from this book, which is so perfect that it says "Think and Grow." It's called "Think and Grow Rich." Is just your thoughts are what you are and what you become. Like everything you think. Yes, he didn't. Okay, this book is, first of all, it's full of all caps. Is your version too?
All caps.
I mean, like he writes in all caps all the time.
Oh, okay. I thought you meant the whole book is, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like overwhelmed. I'm like, it's like he's like shouting at me with all this all caps all the time.
But you know, if you pay attention to it, those things.
No, they are. A lot of them are really good.
They need to be shouted at me about.
This one, so I'm always struck. Sometimes I'm struck by something he didn't put in all caps that makes me feel like he wasn't trying to emphasize as much. But this just blew my mind. And it's in the last chapter. He says, "Nature has endowed man," and to me, when he says nature, that's God. God has endowed man with absolute control over but one thing, and that is thought. Like your thought. And I'm like, whoa. I've always heard it said that the only thing you can control is yourself, which is saying the same thing. But I always thought about it as you can only control your own actions. You can only control how you react to other people. But all of that comes down to your thought and what your thoughts are. And that is literally the only thing you can, and your actions are all driven from your thoughts. So I don't know. I just, it's like everything that you think, you can control your thought. You can control everything you think. You control everything that you do. I don't know. It's like you control your world basically by controlling your thoughts, which is so crazy. It's so crazy.
I think from other authors, I started to understand the concept of reframing your thoughts. Like if you discover you have a negative thought that keeps popping in, to reframe it into something positive. Like I'm looking forward to this changing into blah, 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 you know?
Right.
And you keep giving that kind of energy to, it may be the same realization, but you're putting a new positive spin on it, and how powerful that is, even just in how much energy is taking out of us. Because if you're living in negative thinking, you're not going to be fully energized as a person.
No.
You're going to be weighed down by the negativity of those thoughts. And it's so powerful.
And the more negative you are, the more you weigh down everyone around you. That's for sure.
Right.
That's crazy.
One of the things that impacted me deeply was that we're fully resourced to do the thoughts that come into our minds. We're fully resourced. And so many times I think, yeah, I would really love to do this, or I would really love to do that. And then I just shut the thought down because I don't see myself as being fully resourced. But if you think about it, is there one, I'll go back to the Wright brothers. Were they fully resourced to make a plane fly? Yeah, they were. They weren't all at once at that moment.
Right.
But they were fully resourced in the sense that they made the next step. What is one thing I could do to move forward to this goal? What's one thing I could do? Then every time you put energy into doing one more thing, then more ideas will come to you for the next thing. But if I shut it down because I don't see myself as being fully resourced, then it will never happen.
Right.
And I think that that's kind of similar, like when you were talking about praying, when we pray, are we believing that God could really give us the resources to have this happen, So there's power in believing that you're fully resourced. You may not be fully resourced at that moment, but you
start.
You're fully resourced for the next step.
Right. We think too much in time, like in this moment, and we zoom out and think in the fullness of time we're resourced.
Mm-hmm. And I think I realized how much I live in my comfort zone.
Don't we all?
So if something looks too hard, in my past, I've always thought, not going there.
Right.
That just looks too hard. Well, thank God the Wright brothers and everybody else who's
thank God they
Edison
didn't give up. Right.
and everybody else
they didn't take the easy way.
Yeah, thank God they didn't think like I
Right.
did. So I feel it's kind of interesting because I feel like, okay, I've lived more than half of my life, I'm sure. But in some ways, because I'm, becoming more aware of this and becoming more self-aware, like how much say we do have in our lives, I feel like I'm just beginning my life in a lot of ways because my perception.
That's what I feel like.
Yeah. Because my perception is different, and I realize, we don't need to just sit around and wait for life to happen to us.
Well, and like a small example, I'm trying to just do things now, like, and not think, like you said, not think like, oh, wouldn't this be nice? Or I wish. And like this video was one of those things where I was thinking, oh, when you were texting me and stuff, I'm like, oh, that'd be fun to have us sit down and do the video. So then I didn't ask you to do this until last night, which in my mind, your mind comes up with all these excuses to stay comfortable of like, oh, this, it's like, oh, it's too last minute. I'm not even done reading the book. I shouldn't, but I gave myself the deadline of recording this video today. And instead of just being like, oh, wouldn't that be cool if we had done the video together? And I could do this by myself, but it wouldn't, I don't think, be as good and wouldn't be as fun for me. And I just was like, no, I'm just going to try to do this. And just, instead of letting all the excuses crop up.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to be willing to shoot down all those excuses.
Right.
And see obstacles as challenges that you could be excited about. Oh, I can't wait to, like you said, I can't wait till this challenge is out of the way, rather than just like, oh, that's why it's there. And that's what he talks about here. It's like everyone has the potential, but 99% of people, when they get that roadblock, it's like, okay, and you're done, right? It's like Brooke in her podcast, she always talks about kids walking. When they learn to walk, they keep failing and they never stop trying. But yet we stop after one failure or two or three tops, right? Once 3 strikes and you're out, and then we're just done, instead of like constantly just grinding and saying, no, if this is something that I have decided that I'm going to do, I'm going to do it absolutely no matter what. I absolutely love that.
And once you make that decision that you're going to do it, just making that decision gives energy to it. It's like when you plant a seed. For several days, you don't see anything happening. But that seed is starting to, the roots are starting to are starting to grow a little bit, bring in nutrition, and we give it nutrition, we give it water, we give it what it needs to keep going. And for a while, you don't see anything happening. And that's when I think a lot of times in my life, I didn't see anything happening.
Right.
So I would
like
stop. I guess that idea wasn't good. But, if you keep going and you believe that this, that if you just keep nurturing this idea and keep working towards it, it will happen. It's just going to happen because that's how God made the world to work.
And why do you, when you're actually literally planting a seed, what keeps you watering it? Faith. Undoubted faith, right? There's no doubt in your mind, like, oh, I don't know if this whole water thing works. Like, you just know. You're like, no, this is how the world works. So we don't doubt that whatsoever. We just know A plus B equals C. Watering the seed equals it will grow. And if someone who didn't know that saw you watering the ground, which is what he talks about in here, the naysayers, they're just like, why are you wasting your time doing this? Like, why would you water dirt? Like, that's not doing. But if you have that unshakable faith, here it is. He did not put it in all caps, but he did put it in italics. He says, and this is in the last chapter, he says, without doubt, the most common weakness of all human beings is the habit of leaving their minds open to the negative influence of other people. I was just like,
Mm.
whoa, like he's just, to him, that's without a doubt, like, and that is like, people just say, why are you doing, it's like you doing Young Living. I'm sure, I don't know if anyone actually said it to you, but there's that idea of like, this isn't going to go anywhere. Like, what, you know what I mean?
Yeah. That's one of those network marketing things. They don't work.
So he talks about how important it is to write down your goals and to read them to yourself. So what do you do? Do that? What do you?
Yeah, I do that every morning and every evening. Is this what you're talking about?
Yes.
Those 6 things. So
Fix in your mind the exact amount of money you desire. It is not sufficient merely to say, I want plenty of money, right? And then you define it, you write it down, you create the plan, you write a clear and concise statement of the amount of money you intend to acquire and the time limit. And then you read the statement aloud twice daily. This is crazy because it's not my goals like that. I've been writing down my habits, like I do not do this or I do this. Like, and I've been reading it to myself in the morning and at night. So it's just funny that that's what he says to do. So is yours a money goal? Is that what you have? Is that you have? I want this much money by this time.
You can apply it to anything.
I know. I'm just wondering what yours is. Like, is it money?
Yeah, I do have one for money.
Oh, you still have multiple.
Yeah, I have a couple, but one is for money. But you can apply it to anything, and he talks specifically of the difference about having a want and having a desire. A want is there's a certain energy in want that's kind of negative because it kind of implies that you are lacking.
It's like whiny, like I want this.
Yeah, but it implies that you are lacking. Where the word desire, this is a goal I have. This is what my heart's desire is. And I am going to make a decision to do things that are gonna, put me closer to that goal all the time. So when you're deciding how you're going to spend your time, like I stopped watching TV because I realized how much time I was wasting, and watching TV doesn't.
You wasted time watching TV? When?
Well, years ago, I stopped watching TV. And it was because I started counting how many. Yeah, like I would go to work and I come home and I would sit down and I would just watch TV. And I never gave it a second thought. It's so weird
that that's how what we just do.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I started realizing, gosh, I could be reading books. I could be listening to podcasts that help me change my life. I could be
rereading,
studying things.
I could read my Napoleon Hill Bible.
And starting to apply these things, and look at how many people in the world need us. They need financial help. They need someone to say, hey, you're worth it. They need affirmations. They need products. There's so many people in the world that are waiting for you or a me to come by their side.
One thing, I want to make a video about this, but one thing that I have started doing, I heard this from someone who was relaying it secondhand. I don't know who first came up with it, but it was like the best way to, the best way to live is to think about yourself as the main character of a movie or book, and then just keep asking yourself, what would the main character be doing? So, and it's perfect because our lives are in conflict. We have these things that we're not happy with, or we don't, or whatever. And that's what books and movies are. Stories are always, here's a character in conflict, and then it's how did they grow through that and overcome it. And at every moment, and so I've been trying to do this just in every moment. Every time I have a decision, it's crazy how much clarity that brings to me when it's like, okay, should I do this? It's like, I didn't think of it this way, but doing this video today could be an example of that. Like, oh, should I just do it myself, or should I make the effort to try to finish this book quick and get out there and make it? It's like, well, what would the main character do? What would be the most interesting thing or the most growing thing? And then it always makes it more clear to me in that when I'm like, what would the main character do? Oh, they would do this. It's often the less comfortable thing, but it's, I don't know, that question more than anything. It's almost like, what would Jesus do? But that's just so, that feels much less attainable or
Mhm.
relatable. But it's like, what would the main character of a story do? That to me just like clicks with everything. It's like, oh, that makes it so clear to me. So that's, I don't know, it's just something I've been doing.
Well, that's a neat way to think about it. I know in this book they talk about making decisions according to, like, once you have established what you want your goal to be or your goals to be, to have all of your actions reflect
Right.
moving towards those
Hmm.
goals, you know. So, is watching TV going to help
Right,
me?
exactly. Is this getting me anywhere?
Yeah, is it going to help me obtain my goal? No.
No.
So, it's just a simple no.
Right, exactly.
Is going through Facebook for a couple of hours, or whatever whatever your social media is that going to help you in your long-term
Right.
goal? No.
No.
That's a time waster, so if you can start thinking like that, or the way you just said too, I like
Well, and the
that.
thing I like about it too is if you think about watching a movie or reading a book, they take out all the boring parts. You would never watch a movie and sit there for half of the movie watching someone scroll through Facebook. So I like that third person, like watching myself. That's why I like the idea of thinking of myself as a character in a movie. So if someone else is watching right now,
Mhm.
if I was being studied in a lab and it was like whatever that movie was where he's just, it's like the most boring thing is watching you do this. And it's boring because it's not action. You're not doing anything. You know what I mean? Even something that might be boring, like watching someone exercise or write a book, that would be boring to watch them through the whole process. But we still see that in movies. It's just in the form of a montage with like exciting music. You know what I mean? But it still can be exciting to watch someone work out or write a book with that exciting music. But there's no exciting music you could put behind someone scrolling through Facebook that's going to make that interest. So that's what I like too about what would the main character do. It's like the main character would maybe take a break and watch YouTube for a few minutes, not an hour.
Right.
So it helps me think in that way too.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I know. Isn't that a cool? I
I'm
love
gonna
it.
write that idea down.
While you do that, I'm going to read this quote that I absolutely love.
Okay.
This is, I don't know the verse,
Or the line.
but
What chapter?
it's from the last chapter.
Okay.
And he says, if you demand riches, determine what form and how much will be required to satisfy you. So what is that desire? What are your goals? What's that desire? What is it? What's that exact number there? What's that exact thing? You know the road that leads to riches, because it's at the end of the book. So he's like, I've given you the road. You know the road that leads to riches. You have been given a roadmap which, if followed, will keep you on that road. If you neglect to make the start or stop before you arrive, no one will be to blame but you. This responsibility is yours. No alibi will save you from accepting the responsibility if you now fail or refuse to demand riches of life, because the acceptance calls for but one thing. One thing, incidentally, the only thing you can control, and that is a state of mind. I just love that. So it's like if you can demand out of life whatever you want. Like you can create your reality, you can create your circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember if he says it in this book, but one concept I really like is the idea of, well, extreme ownership, and the idea of whatever your life situation is right now, it is your doing. You have either done things to cause your life situation or you have allowed things.
Mm-hmm.
And which is so exciting and empowering because that means you can change your life situation by making other choices and becoming actively pursuant of that desire, whatever that desire
Right.
is.
Yeah. So Paul Martinelli, who is leading this, it's kind of a book study. Never graduated from high school. He had a stuttering problem because he was abused terribly growing up in his home, and I think by his mother. But when you have a stuttering problem and you're going to school, of course you're the the favorite
Right.
target, But anyway, he had all these things going against him. And he started a cleaning company just to make money, because that didn't take a lot of schooling thought,
Right.
But he ended up with this amazing company because he was willing to do the work, and he was willing to be determined.
Right.
Where a lot of people would have given up in everything that he went through. He just decided, I'm doing this and that's it. Then eventually he got introduced to people that understood these concepts, and his whole life changed. And he is now working side by side with John Maxwell,
Just crazy.
who is the #1 leadership writer
guru
in the world. He's known in,
speaking of John Maxwell,
all these
a
countries.
concept that he gave me, I didn't know, because you love John Maxwell and I knew nothing about him. But in one of my classes, I've been showing one of his videos. I just didn't know who he was.
Oh.
He said something in there that stuck with me that just blew my mind, and it was about momentum.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you've seen the video or heard him say this or whatever, but he says that momentum is everything, basically, is what he says, which is kind of the same thing as persistence. But momentum, we think of persistence, we think of it just slog. But momentum is the same thing, but it means it's building as it goes. And you're not always seeing that momentum happening.
Mm-hmm.
So the visual, I love metaphors, and the metaphor that he gave for this was a train that's has momentum, that's going, can smash through a wall, right? It's gonna just, if you just picture a train, it just smashes through it's unstoppable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Has so much momentum, it's just unstoppable, it's powerful. But that same train without momentum, just sitting on the railroad tracks, if you were to put a wedge, just some kind of little wooden wedge or something in there, it cannot go, because it has no momentum. Even so, like the tiniest roadblock, if you allow yourself to have these little roadblocks before you have momentum, it's just, you're not going to go anywhere. Whereas that same little wedge, you go and put it on the rail while it's going through, it doesn't even notice. It just smashes right through. And that just like blew my mind, because it's like, doing anything, the hardest part, I feel like, is starting. Writing a paper, what's the hardest thing? Getting started. You need to build momentum, and that's true for everything. And we let these little roadblocks prevent us saying, oh well, we never build momentum. And I don't know, that just really stuck with me as being so true.
Yeah, and he talks about a couple of other ideas we haven't talked about is procrastination and excuses. We've kind of talked about excuses without using the word.
Right.
But I remember the moment I realized that my reasons were really excuses.
Right. All your
I was like, what?
Justifications.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't have time. I don't have money. I don't have, these thoughts would come to me. I want to do this, but I don't have this. And so then it stops. Well, those are excuses, because if I don't have money, can I think of one thing I could do to start making a little bit more money? Is there one thing I could start doing right now that could bring in some more money? Do I even go that far? Or time? Is there something I could give up? We talked about, giving up TV or social media or whatever. We all waste time. We all do. It's a matter of figuring out what we're wasting it on. Or maybe we need to let go of something. What are we willing to do or to let go of to achieve our goal?
And I think it's important to help change the way we think, is to help change the way we speak. And someone I listened to, a financial podcast, said that it's not good we don't want to say we can't afford things or tell our kids we can't afford things, because you can afford most of the things. I might not be able to, buy a castle, but most things that I say I can't afford, I absolutely can afford. I just don't prioritize it.
You don't choose
Right.
to spend
If
money
I
on it.
didn't pay my mortgage or anything this month, I could afford a lot of things. So I think it's important, and that goes for time too. Instead of saying I don't have time for this, tell yourself I'm not prioritizing this. And when you say I don't have time to exercise or to work on my side hustle, it feels like, okay, I would love to exercise more. I would love to write that book or do that thing, but I don't have time. So I'm fine. But if you tell yourself I am not prioritizing exercising, I'm not prioritizing writing that book, and that's the truth. That's what you're really doing, is you're not prioritizing. You're not making. So that's what Aaron and I are trying to do, is say those things. I'm not making the time to do this. I'm not prioritizing doing that, instead of just saying I don't have time.
Yeah.
And both are different ways of saying the same thing, but one lets you completely off the hook.
Right.
Yeah, you're right. You don't have time with your priorities as you have them right now.
But you're also convincing your subconscious mind, you're supporting that idea that you don't have time. I like the word choose in talking about this.
That's good.
I choose to use my time differently. Not like I don't have time. I'm choosing to use my time on something else. Or I'm choosing to use my money on something else. Because that puts the responsibility back in your court, and you have the power. You have the power to use your time however you want.
Which is so
we all have the same amount of time. We have different things going on in our lives, but
you have 24
I
hours.
I remember when you guys were little, and I remember thinking, my gosh, I don't even feel like I have time to pray. But then I started thinking, well, I could pray when I'm nursing the baby. So I started making that my prayer time. Because when you're nursing a baby, you're not.
You can't do anything else. You can't cook.
Right. Right. But it's so I started to realize it's not that I don't have time. It's that I need to be more creative in finding those little moments. Finding the moment to call someone that you need to call, or to say, it's finding the moment.
Well, and that's what I find so helpful about how I've been reading my list of habits to myself every day. And one of them, actually, I just made a video about it earlier today, but it hasn't uploaded it yet. But it's about exercising. And so every day to exercise, I just dance in the morning and just put on music and just dance, which is pathetic form of exercise. I'm very.
No, it's awesome.
I know, but I'm very go big or go home. So I want to be like, I need to do all of this and do this workout and that. And then if I'm not doing that, I'm like, oh, well, then it's so it's like something. But my point is, doing these things, making time for it. When I read that to myself every day and I say, I dance, I start each day with dance. That's what I wrote. So now that I'm holding myself accountable to that, the days that I don't want to do it, I just do it because I told myself that I do it. You know what I mean? I'm reframing that to my head, like, no, this is what you do, even when you don't want to do it. And it's like you said, find what works for you. Found a time that makes sense, where you're already in a peaceful state that kind of, lends itself to that. That's what I try to do with exercise. That's why I dance. It's like, find something that I enjoy doing. So even when you don't want to, if you hate running on the treadmill and you're like, I'm going to go on the treadmill every day. Are you though? Are you going to do that every day? How long will that last if you don't at least enjoy it somewhat? But yeah, I think
you could listen to something.
Right. That's what. Yeah. That's why I like incorporating music
fun.
and just making it fun. Right.
Yeah.
So I do that every day. But yeah.
Yeah. So I think one thing that's really helped me in my life is forming very small habits, very achievable habits. Like, for instance, moving. Like exercise. I'm not someone who is going to go to the gym every day or even 3 times a week or what. But I could spend 20 minutes walking.
Right.
So while I'm listening to a podcast.
Right, exactly.
Or, walking on our beautiful river walk, especially this time of year with all the, make it fun, make it something that you can do. And if it's not 20 minutes, how about 10 minutes?
Right.
But do it.
But do it right.
If you think that 10 minutes, you could do 10 minutes every day, and that 10 minutes is something that you will
Right.
fit in and you won't slough off. It's only 10 minutes. Okay, so do 10
Do
minutes.
10 minutes.
Do 10 minutes. It's powerful. It's extremely powerful when you do something over and over again every day,
It is.
even if it's just something really small, because once it's a habit, then you're probably not going to go back.
Right.
But if you have a goal that is bigger than what you know you're going to stay committed to, then that's worse than finding a real tiny goal that you know you
Right.
you will commit to.
And yeah, and then it becomes a habit, and then you don't question
Right.
it.
Yes.
Mhm.
So, and sometimes you need tools for habits, you know, like maybe you just need to get yourself more organized and you need to get a calendar system or whatever.
Which I did, and yeah.
Yeah. So you think about, okay, what's something going on in my life right now that I'm not happy with? How could I change it? Not can I change
Right.
it?
Woe is me. I don't.
How can I change it? What is one little thing I can do to start making a difference in that area of my life?
And actually, this is such. I don't know why I think this way, but somehow along the way I've started thinking. It's like we were talking about trying to pack things into the van. The question of, can we really pack all this stuff in? Or of course we can. The question is how. And I've somehow started thinking that way for everything. I think it's when I started getting into minimalism and trying to get down to like the minimal things and how would we do this, or if we only had one of these or that kind of thing. So I now think in many ways there is always a perfect way to do this. It's just a way of me finding it. And you keep trying, and it's like, okay, this didn't work. Try something else. I tried doing push-ups every day. That didn't. Wasn't able to stick with it. Why not? Instead of just saying this is how it should be, and then just failing at that, and you just keep thinking, what's okay? Then what? It's like praying while you're nursing. You have to be creative and just keep thinking, but you have to have faith that there is a way first, instead of just saying, oh well, this is just too hard. I just don't have the time. I don't have the money. But you think, no, there is a way, and it's like exciting. It's like there's got to be a perfect way to do this. We just have to figure out what that is. And
exactly. And that's what Napoleon Hill discovered in all of these people that he studied and interviewed, that the successful ones were the ones that asked that way. They asked the question that way because it's really how God designed the world to work, you know, that he puts those thoughts in our minds of, oh, wouldn't that be cool to do this?
Right.
Or wouldn't that be cool if this? We don't have those thoughts for nothing. And I never realized that. I mean, I just thought, oh yeah, that would be nice.
We all wish
and
things,
that,
right.
You know, but hey, what if I were an instrument of making that happen? You know, I never realized how much power we really have,
right,
if we just move forward on it.
Persist. Just change the way you think and persist. So it's like the biggest thing in the book. It's just
Right.
like only feed positive things.
The procrastination.
Right.
At one point in this book, he talks about one of the biggest. Oh, I'm sorry.
This is so unprofessional.
He talks about procrastination being the one thing that every successful person has to fight.
Interesting.
And procrastination, as far as when you have a thought and it feels too big, you know, then you don't act on it. And he says it's a form of procrastination.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It kind of goes along with this, but when your intention is clear, a mechanism will appear.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So when you write it down, when you write down your goal, what you want to do, when you want to be successful in that goal, you write all those details down and you read it every day.
And then your brain, your subconscious starts figuring it out. It's like, oh shoot, this is what we're doing. Let's do this.
How am I going to do this? Right. And it starts figuring things out. And then your mind gets open to the next step.
Because you're summoning it, basically. You're calling those tools to you.
And that's how God designed this world to work. And we know that because every successful person who has, you know, invented something or, have done something really major that affected a lot of people in the world, or maybe even every person in the world. They've gone through this.
It's crazy.
Yeah. And each of us, we think of ourselves as maybe just an average person that doesn't have a whole lot to contribute to the world, when in actuality, the only reason why that
Which is what you are, because you think that, though.
Exactly. Yes. So we are, because that's how we think of ourselves. When we think of ourselves as someone who can make a major difference in the world, and we believe that, and we start working on the ideas that come into our minds, then things happen.
Another thought experiment that Brooke Castillo talks about that I think is really cool is write down your goals or what you want to achieve, and then ask your future self how you accomplish them.
Oh.
So you say, I want to, achieve this, write this book, or make this much money, or move to Hawaii, or whatever it is that you want to do. You put with a time frame, and then you imagine and have an imaginary conversation with your future self and say, okay, how did I do this? Because it seems impossible because of this. And you present the roadblocks to your future self, and then imagine your future self, and you tell, oh, this is how I did that. I just didn't give up. I didn't listen when this happened, or I found other ways to make money. And I think that's a really cool way of summoning that too.
Yeah.
Because you're just tricking your brain to not be stuck in what you're seeing right now, and you're kind of breaking free of that.
Now, another point too, I think is good to be aware of, is when you establish your goal, you write it down, you give it a time frame. Mm-hmm. You may or may not reach that time frame, and it really doesn't matter if you do or not. So you don't ever want to go, well, that didn't work,
right,
so I'm not going to do that anymore. No, because you moved forward tremendously trying to reach that time frame. So it's not
a failure per se.
Right, and the time frame isn't as important as the action of giving it a time frame.
Yes.
So that the energy and the movement will go towards something.
Perfect example. I bring this up in my time management class. I started I decided a few years ago, maybe, I don't know, to become more intentional about getting out of debt early, my student debt, and paying off my student loans, and actually putting extra money towards them instead of just doing. So for a while, we were just doing the minimum payments and just kind of not thinking about it. And I don't know where our money was going. I don't know how I lived without a budget. But anyways, I started budgeting and deciding to put extra money towards the student loans, which was great. But I didn't have a time frame. I was just like, oh, we'll put this amount of extra money away, or whatever we end up with extra, which was good and way better than nothing. But when I started learning more about how important giving yourself deadlines is, I sat down, I looked at our student loans, and I realized how many we have, and I decided we're going to get out of debt in 2 years, the student debt, and that would require paying off one of my student debts each quarter, so every 3 months. And that has completely changed my mental, as opposed to just like, oh, however much extra I have. It's like, no, shoot, I have a deadline here. I need to. And so it completely changes your focus, because now you've told your brain, we have a deadline. Like, this is what needs to happen. I mean, think about when you have, something to do in an hour, you're become much more focused on that, as opposed to, oh, this is a thing, I'm going to write this book someday, or I'm going to do this thing. Yeah, no, the deadline is so what is your deadline? You said you had a money goal. When is your deadline for that money goal? Is it like long term?
Well, I used to do long term ones, and then it didn't have the same impact.
Right, it doesn't push you.
So I've discovered if I have shorter amounts of time to achieve smaller goals, that works much better for me.
But do you?
Because it feels more achievable.
What I've always heard is to do both, to have a long term. Is that what you do?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but I never used to have the smaller time frame.
That's what I did. So I said 2 years, and that's a longer frame. But then it's okay, how am I going to get there? And then it's every 3 months, so you have that tight focus on the smaller ones. Right. So what are your time frames? What's your long term and what's your short?
So I have a short term one for I mean, maybe some people wouldn't think this is short term, but for March 2020, I have a short term one. And then I have a longer term one for June of 2020.
Okay.
So, and I have other bigger goals too that are down the road that
Right.
could be like maybe 5 years from now
See, and
or something like that.
so, but you don't have specific time frames on those.
Oh, 5 years from now.
Oh, well, you said it might be, but
Yeah, but
I'm just wondering if you have actually written down
I
like in
actually
5
wrote
years.
down
Okay,
5 years. Yeah.
that's what I was wondering.
So, yeah, and it's interesting because I resisted doing this for a while because it was a money goal. And again, going back to all those belief systems about money. But what I realized is this is not about the money. It's about everything that all the ways that I grow, the process of my growth as becoming a better person, you know, while I'm getting to that goal. And not only that, but because I am in network marketing, how many people am I going to be affecting to improve their lives?
Right.
That gets me so much more excited than the money part. I'm not nearly as motivated by the money part as I am about how many lives.
But the money is an indicator because of the nature of your company.
Right. Exactly. So the money part is just a byproduct. It's a measurable byproduct.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You know, like sometimes you can't measure the other wonderful things that are happening.
So I teach that too in my time management class. It's like you have to have. We have an acronym, and that's one of the letters in the acronym. Is it has to be measurable. It has to be specific, and then it has to be measurable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no way for you to measure how many people's lives you've affected or how many health things are. That's not measurable. So the money, that makes sense. That ties it in. Is the money is the measurable metric.
Mm-hmm.
That you have there. I know one thing he talked about in the end. He talks about the things that are going to stop you, basically, and different types of fears that we can face. And one of the things he talked about, indecision, doubt, and fear are 3 things. And he goes into the fear specifically. But I know right now, indecision, I think, is the thing that's where I am. Because I don't have doubt.
You think that goes along
with procrastination? Oh, absolutely. Because right now I'm realizing I can do whatever I want with my life. Mm-hmm. And I don't think fear is holding me back. I don't think it's doubt that's holding me back. But I do think it's indecision because I'm like, oh, do I want to become a consultant? Do I want to become a life coach? Do I want to become a speaker? Which it's fine, I think, to be in there, but then you have to. I should probably give myself a deadline of when I'm going to decide what I'm going to do. You know, well, that's the thing is I have these things, but I'm letting myself live in the fog of that because I'm so busy with my actual job and everything that I'm allowing myself not to take time to. I think it's fine that I haven't. You know, I don't want to just pick something randomly, but I'm not prioritizing choosing something, or I'm just kind of in the fog. I'm not really praying about it or anything. I'm just like, oh, I don't know what I want to do, so I could do anything.
That's procrastination,
right?
Yeah.
Yep. So I think that's just kind of where I am at right now.
Yeah, he said that that's one issue that all successful people deal with is procrastination.
So maybe I just need to give myself a deadline and say I'm going to choose. I know. Well, but by this time, if you haven't picked something, too late. Just pick the closest thing and start doing it. I don't know.
Or you could actually give yourself some time to think about it. Like
that's what I'm saying. Give myself a deadline so then I start.
But even program. I don't know if you need to do something like this, but sometimes I need to even just like program a time in my day to think about it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think if I gave myself a deadline, you have to decide by the end of this year or whatever it is, then that would cause me to say, okay, then what are my mini goals? I need to focus on this more each day to kind of figure out what it is. But maybe I just need to ask my future self what I ended up doing. see what he says.
You look at your gifts, you look at things that you enjoy and try. I mean, I think some people skip all of this. They look at what is going to bring money in to pay for their thing. They don't think about what their gifts are, what they enjoy, bring money in.
Right.
I think it's really important to look at all 3 of those things.
Absolutely.
Because God gave us specific gifts or a reason.
So
And I think it's to share with the rest of the world. So one of the things that I thought was interesting that I learned when I went to the live event was that this whole idea again of being fully, like, we have the answers, we just got to ask the right questions.
mhm.
So one of the things that they did was they said, okay, watch me juggle. They had someone on stage juggling. Okay. And they're like, okay. And then he goes, did you got that? It's like, what? He goes, you got that? Well, I'll do it for you again. He goes, starts juggling. He goes, you got that? And we're like, then he said, okay, I want you all to divide up into two people, teams of two people. One person is going to juggle and the other person is going to observe and try to say things that might help that person do a better job. So he had us do this exercise. And of course, we're all flubbing up like crazy, and the other person is desperately trying to, but they don't know how to
Right.
juggle either. So he gives us a certain amount of time, I think 6 minutes per person, to try to figure out how to juggle. And, right away, I'm like, I already know I can't juggle. I've tried this several times in my life. I can't do it, And it was that brain thing in me, that was stopping me from even considering it. Then he calls everybody's attention and he says, okay, who here had, really struggled with this? And one guy raises his hand. He calls him up, puts him on the stage, and he says, all right, show me what you got. And so he starts trying to juggle and he flubs up, and the guy goes, why do you think that he goes, well, what are you trying to accomplish? And he says, I'm trying to juggle successfully with 3 balls. And he says, okay, what is the problem? And the guy thinks, and he goes, I think that when I throw up that second ball, I'm throwing it too far over there and then I can't catch it. And he goes, okay, so what do you think you could do to change that? And he goes, oh, I just have to think more about throwing it up instead of throwing it over. And he goes, okay, would you like to try that? Yeah. So then he does this with this guy, and in a matter of like 2 or 3 minutes, this guy was juggling. The helper did not give him any answers. He just kept asking him questions. Yeah. And then so now he goes, okay, get back with your partner again. And Joe, I started to juggle because I started to think about what I was actually doing wrong. And by the time the 6 minutes were up, I was juggling. And I was like, oh my gosh. Now, I don't care about juggling, but it gave me an awareness that we are fully resourced. We're just not asking ourselves the next question.
That brings me to one of his quotes. So he said, you are both the defendant and the prosecutor in this scenario. So you're kind of accusing yourself and not letting yourself get away with like, oh, I don't have time and all that. And he says, remember, as you check yourself point by point, you are both the court and the jury, the prosecuting attorney and the attorney for the defense, and that you are the plaintiff and the defendant, also that you are on trial. And then this is the part I underlined. Face the facts squarely. Ask yourself definite questions and demand direct replies. And I love that because I feel like that's when we let ourselves off the hook, is we don't demand direct replies and we let ourselves get away with, I don't have time, I've been too busy.
Excuses.
Excuses. It's like, no. What's the real reason? You're not prioritizing this, or you're not trying to make more money, or, so I just thought, yeah, that's exactly right. We're not asking ourselves the right questions.
Right. So the John Maxwell team way of coaching is learning how to ask the other person questions.
Which I feel like I'm really good
not
at.
giving them answers like that will do you think da 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 da? That's a yes or no question. You
Right.
don't ask yes or no questions. You want to ask questions that are not yes or no questions because you don't want to
Right.
plant
Right.
a
You don't
different
want to lead
seed
them
in them.
anywhere. Just why is
Right.
that? What do you think? It's like what
Right.
therapy is. Like, oh,
So,
how do you?
what would you think about looking at it this way?
Right.
And then you find out what they think about it. You know, when the person comes up with it themselves, then it's planted in them. It's they take ownership of
Right.
it, and they're more excited about changing their life with that new piece of information because it didn't come from someone else, it came from within, which is how God designed us to be. Because our connection with God is so important because he is going to give us those resources, you know, if we're just open-minded to it.
A question that Brooke asks her clients and herself, I'm sure, that I love is, why do you choose to think that way? And I love that. Isn't that so good?
Because
or why do you choose to believe that, or why do you choose to think that way when you're like, oh well, he should be doing this, or I don't like this. It's like, oh, why do you choose to think that way? It's like, hey, no, because she's really big on, you think things are facts and that they're reality, but everything is your thought on it. Everything is perspective. So she'll just say, oh, why do you choose to think that way? And it's like, no, this is terrible. It's like, no, why do you choose to think that? Why are you framing it? It's like, oh, I love that.
Paul Martinelli calls that BS. And first time I heard him say BS, I was like, well, that's pretty tough,
harsh,
you know? Yeah. But he says BS when he's talking about belief system. So somewhere in our life, which
that's perfect.
A lot of times,
BS belief system.
A lot of times they're one and the same,
right?
You know? So at some point in our life, we started to believe this idea, and exactly what you're talking about. Why do you choose to believe
why do you
that?
choose to believe?
Oh, well, you know, I remember my mom doing taxes when I was a kid, and you know, this money thing, you know, you get certain concepts of how you feel about money. So when I stop something that is a routine in my life, it's challenging to get going again. I do know that about myself.
Same.
So like, even like, I have a specific routine that I go through every morning. Like, I'm doing some of the stuff that they suggest out of the Think and Grow Rich. I have my prayer time. I have a 10-minute priority time for exercise. Now, a lot of times it goes further than that, but 10 minutes a day. I just have to do the 10 minutes a day. There are certain things that I do every day, but when I go on a trip or something and everything gets messed up, I'm on the plane when I'm supposed to be doing this or that. And then I come back home. Sometimes if it's not an already established habit, then it's hard for me to get back into it again. So that's one of the challenges I realize I need to overcome, because that's just an excuse.
All right. Anything else that we missed? I think we
missed a lot of things. But
I was thinking when I started this book, I'm like, oh, we'll just make a video about it. And then I read this book. I'm like, oh no, you could make a video about this every month.
Oh yeah.
And just keep reading this book over and over. So if you haven't read this book, give it a try.
Yeah.
Thinking just make sure. I haven't read the modernized versions, but I'm all about the original.
Yeah, me too. And get your pen ready to underline, or I like to use a highlighter. Mine has highlighting in it, because you want to, when something stands out to you, you want to remember that. Because if you don't choose to read it over and over again, at least you can read what you have underlined or highlighted over and over again.
Exactly.
Right. And because this stuff takes a while to sink in because we have so much BS.
And that's funny. That's one of Brooke's, her 10 tools. That's one of them, is redefining your belief systems. But I love calling it BS. That's amazing.
Yeah. Now, some of our belief systems are healthy, but a lot of them have no basis to them.
We haven't chosen them. Most of our belief systems we've inherited and we've formed unconsciously.
Right. Like, it's holy to be poor. Well, how many more people could you affect if you were rich? Yeah, there are holy people that are poor, but there's a lot of holy people that are rich too, like Mother Teresa.
Right.
So we have a lot of BS.
We do have a lot of BS. So read this book, rethink your BS. Thank you for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Do you know our ending tagline?
Something, something, something. Love you.
Perfect. So thanks all for watching. I meant to choose our next book and announce it here, but I'll have to post about it later because I haven't. I just want to read this book over and over, so we'll see what happens. So, all right. Thank you for watching. Something, something, something. Love you. Are you sure you want to end the stream?